The world always saw Dylan Wang and Shen Yue as co-stars who sparked magic on screen, but what the world never knew was the story that unfolded when the cameras stopped rolling. Behind the glamour and the endless lights of the industry, there was a secret that lingered between them, one they both carried in silence. It began on a quiet evening after one of their longest shoots. The crew had left, the set was empty, and only the sound of the night echoed through the hallways. Shen Yue was sitting on the steps, her hair falling across her shoulders, exhausted yet radiant in the dim light. Dylan walked over, still holding his script, pretending to rehearse lines, though his eyes never left her face. He asked her if she was all right, and she smiled faintly, saying she was fine. But the truth was written across her expression, and he saw it. That was the first time he realized how deeply he cared for her, beyond the playful banter and staged romance. As weeks turned into months, the bond between them grew in ways neither of them could explain. On set, their chemistry drew admiration, but when the cameras turned off, they became different versions of themselves, vulnerable, unguarded, and raw. Dylan would often sneak into rehearsal rooms late at night, where Shen Yue stayed behind to practice her lines. He never told anyone that he only came because he wanted to be near her. She noticed, of course, though she never confronted him. Instead, she allowed those moments to stretch into hours, as if both feared what would happen if the silence was broken. There was one night that neither of them would ever forget. It was raining heavily, and the city was swallowed in darkness. Shen Yue had missed her ride and stood outside the studio gates, drenched and trembling. Dylan's car appeared, headlights cutting through the storm, and without a word he handed her his jacket. She hesitated, then slipped it on, her eyes meeting his for a fraction of a second that felt like eternity. In that brief moment, the air between them shifted. It was no longer about friendship or professionalism. It was something else, something unspoken, but undeniable. From then on, every small gesture carried weight. When he held her hand in a scene, his grip lingered just a little longer. When she laughed at his jokes, her eyes softened with something more than amusement. When they said goodbye after long days, neither walked away immediately, both waiting, both silently hoping the other would say what their hearts were already screaming. But the world they lived in was unforgiving. Rumors circled, fans speculated, and every glance between them became fuel for gossip. They promised each other to move on, to keep things professional, to bury the emotions that were too dangerous to reveal. Yet, no matter how much they tried, fate kept pulling them back together. There was a night when Dylan called Shen Yue past midnight. He did not say much, only that he wanted to hear her voice. She asked him why, and he replied that silence felt too loud without her. Shen Yue did not answer immediately, but when she finally spoke, her voice cracked with emotions she could not suppress. She said she understood because she felt the same. That night neither of them slept, their hearts racing across the invisible line they had drawn between them. Their hidden love was not filled with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with the small moments that no one else could see. The way he adjusted the microphone on her collar before a scene, his fingers brushing against her skin. The way she would bring him coffee in the morning without him asking, knowing exactly how he liked it. The way they looked at each other during press conferences, pretending it was just friendly admiration, when in truth, it was the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. But the secrecy was not easy. They argued, not about their feelings, but about the fear of losing everything. Dylan once confessed in frustration that he hated pretending he did not care, and Shen Yue whispered that she hated how much she cared. It was a love that demanded silence, yet screamed louder than anything either of them had ever known. As years passed, the memories piled up, and the distance between them grew heavier. Still, whenever they crossed paths, it was as if time collapsed, and the same unspoken emotions surged back, raw and unyielding. Behind the glamour of fame, behind the staged smiles and scripted lines, there remained a truth that no spotlight could erase. Dylan Wang and Shen Yue had lived a love story hidden from the world, one stitched into fleeting glances and midnight phone calls, one that would haunt them long after the cameras stopped rolling. And perhaps that was the most powerful part of their secret. It was never about what was shown on screen. It was about what lived in the shadows, where two hearts met and refused to let go, even when the world demanded they should. Their hidden love was not an ending, nor a beginning. It was a truth buried behind the glamour, untold yet unforgettable, fragile yet unbreakable. And though they may never confess it openly, those who looked closely enough could always see it, shimmering quietly in the spaces between every smile they shared. Silence fell after that unforgettable evening, the kind of silence that does not mean absence, but instead carries the weight of everything unsaid. Dylan sat alone in his apartment, the city lights painting shadows across the floor. His phone lay on the table, face down, yet his eyes kept drifting to it, as if waiting for a message he knew would never arrive. Shen Yue's name lingered in his thoughts like a whisper he could not push away. Shen Yue, on the other hand, stared at her reflection in the mirror, her eyes betraying an ache she could no longer disguise. She had smiled for cameras all day, laughed for the audience, and carried the burden of perfection with grace, but when the lights dimmed and the noise faded, the loneliness seeped back in. She touched her lips softly, remembering the way Dylan once spoke her name, as if it carried a universe of secrets. Days turned into weeks, yet their paths kept crossing. At rehearsals, on set, even in unplanned encounters at quiet cafes, fate seemed determined to remind them that moving on was easier said than done. Every time their eyes met, it was like two currents colliding. Intense, unstoppable, dangerous. One night, long after the world had gone to sleep, Dylan found himself standing outside Shen Yue's door. His hand hovered just above the wood, his chest heavy with hesitation. He wanted to knock, wanted to break the silence, but fear rooted him in place. He turned to leave, but just then the door creaked open. Shen Yue stood there, her eyes wide, as if she had been waiting for him. Neither spoke at first. The stillness was broken only by the faint sound of her breathing, quick and uneven. Finally, Dylan whispered her name, and the way it slipped from his lips shattered every barrier she had tried to build. Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not turn away. They sat together inside, words tumbling out between long pauses, stories they had never dared to share spilling into the night. Dylan confessed the loneliness he had hidden behind his public smile, the pressure that weighed on him, the way he thought of her even when surrounded by thousands. Shen Yue admitted the same, her voice trembling as she revealed how every laugh she gave to the cameras was a mask, one that hid her longing for the only person who truly saw her. Hours passed. The clock ticked. Yet time felt irrelevant, because in that moment, it was just them, stripped of fame, stripped of glamour, stripped of everything except the raw truth of their connection. And then came the silence again, but this time it was different. This silence was not empty. It was full of unspoken promises, of what could be, of what should have been. Dylan reached out, his hand brushing hers, hesitant but desperate. She did not pull away. Instead, her fingers curled into his, as if they belonged there. For a brief, fragile moment, the world outside ceased to exist. No paparazzi, no fans, no flashing lights. Only two souls caught in the gravity of each other. But reality is cruel, and dawn has no mercy. The first light of morning crept into the room, breaking the illusion they had so carefully built through the night. Shen Yue pulled her hand away, her face torn between desire and fear. Dylan looked at her, his eyes heavy, knowing that once again, they would have to step back into roles the world demanded of them. "Do not forget this night," she whispered, her voice breaking. "How could I?" he replied, his gaze locked on hers, "when it is the only truth I have left." And with that, they parted again. But this time the silence they carried was not one of endings. It was a silence charged with possibility, with the weight of unfinished stories, with the undeniable truth that no matter how far they ran, no matter how hard they tried, Dylan and Shen Yue were bound by something neither fame nor fear could erase. Behind the glamour, behind the staged smiles, behind every red carpet appearance, their hearts continued to beat in sync, hidden from the world, yet undeniable to each other. The story was not over. It was only just beginning.